Dear students, I am going to talk about attitude of people towards English language during the early Middle English period. Well, this attitude continued through the whole Middle English period, but I would particularly focus on the early part. I hope after completing this session, you would be able to understand the attitude of people and how did it affect the form and shape of English. Well, there is no reason to think that the preference of the governing class of England was French language. Of course, because the ruling class originally belonged to the French background, because they had connections in France, because they had families there, because they had possessions and properties there, and also because they spent a lot of time of their lives there. Naturally, French was their language. So this was the language that emerged as a language of the court of the times. The idea that the newcomers were hostile to English, I would say this is not an idea that we should buy. This is not an idea that sounds to be true. Well, they were speaking French, they were interested in French, and they were continuously spreading it through their usage. However, it does not mean at all that they were enemies of or they were against English language. As a matter of fact, when we analyze the situation of English language of the early Middle English times, we would realize that this was the language of masses or of the uneducated class or of the poor people, and thus the language itself was comparatively crude and it was very less civilized as compared to French language. In fact, till 1200, what was happening? In fact, how it was happening and what was happening was that the king and the upper class were not interested in English. They were using French for all their purposes, and I would not say that they were against spreading or, promoting English, but their attitude was basically not of hostility, but of indifference. So, this indifference had certain reasons. Because English was of no use for them, because the circle in which they moved, nobody was using English, because the kind of life they were living was more associated with the French life, that is why they did not need English or they were not interested. What were the results? The results were they did not cultivate English. Of course, once they were not interested, they would not make efforts, they would not make policies, they would not do anything special to promote English language. However, they had acquaintance with it. It does not mean that they did not know English at all. They knew it, but it was not in usage. Their activities in England did not necessitate its use. The result was that English language was neglected till 1200. Their constant concern with their continental affairs needed them to promote and to use French, and this is what they were doing through all this time period.